So, good day everyone. I will discuss the next material, which is the Levine and the Forens 1990. So, this material is focuses on the regulatory capture, public interest, and the public agenda. So, basically, for the first slide, it says that the regulatory exists to serve the common good or the public, and its goal is to fix the market failures like monopolies, exploitations, and the environmental harm. So basically, there are actors involved in the regulatory process, which is the policymakers or the bureaucrats and the public servants, or the bureaucrats views as the public servants, um, or they act beyond the personal gains or self-interest, and they do what is best for society. So ideally, there is a public interest theory which is idealistic, but sometimes it is unrealistic. So for the public interest theory, um, this theory is also a capture or a special interest theory, which is known as the economic or the government services. So it highlights the politicians' behavior, which is described as the regulatory processes as having the narrow goals and self-interested. While the capture is also a political behavior, this theory is founded by Dons Olson, 1957, which systematically applied the regulatory behavior and applied to economics. So this model is recognition of transaction and information cost that could help us to predict or to understand the political responses. So what really happens inside the regulatory? So this lack motivations and the working model is used to understand how the regulatory process and the actors act on inside the regulatory. So this lack is refers to freedom of the legislators, which have been there isn't much enough information or attention from the public. So when people aren't that much informed or involved in the creating policies or inside the activities, or they are not involved in making decisions. So regulators are the principal agents relationships. They gain more space to create their own choices. So this lack, which is the freedom, can be used in good ways and also in a negative way. So the regulators can make their own can make fair decisions and independent decisions based on what is right for the public, or what benefits the public. So on the other hand, it can be misused. It can be lead to favoritism, self-interest, or captured by the powerful groups or actors. So this lack, it provides an opportunity to act, but how they use, or how the regulators use this opportunity um, determines whether it benefits the public. So basically, the Birkin model, it emphasizes the representations of and the obligations of the regulators, the bureaucrats, the politicians, the policymakers. So the Birkin model of regulation, it focuses on the idea that the regulators should act as responsible representatives of the public interest or for the people. So instead of following the public pressure or the interest of powerful groups, they have the moral duty to use their own judgment, values, or expertise to do what's truly best for the society. So the Birkin model sees that the regulators act not just as rule enforcers or policy makers, but also as public servants. So they are basically making thoughtful decisions, promote the protection of the common good, the public, and even the decisions that will benefit the people. So,
Good day everyone. Today I will discuss regulatory capture. So to start, what is regulatory capture? According to the material, regulatory capture, it happens when a government regulator who is supposed to act in public interest, it instead acts in the favor of the industry it regulates. In regulatory capture, there are government actors, and these government actors are the supervisors and the decision makers. So the supervisors, these are the people who they implement the regulation. On the other hand, we have the decision maker, which are the people who actors that set policy and the regulatory framework. Now, these two interact with each other, and the supervisor, they depend on the decision makers for authority and resources. On the other hand, the decision makers, they rely on supervisors for information, which this chain or this interaction between the two government actors, it allows capture to enter at either level, which is through political influence or control of information. Now let's move forward to how the capture happens. So according to the material of Ren Levy's 2011, he identifies two key mechanisms, which are the capture of decision and the capture of information. For the capture of decision, the firms, they directly influence the individual who create or approve the policy, which often involve lobbying, political pressure, and incentives. On the other hand, we have the capture of information, which firms manipulate the flow of information because regulators depend on them for technical data. This is extremely powerful. Now, we have how to give solutions to this capture. First, we have the solutions for the capture of decisions. So the solution is to have the policy to improve the process and the procedure itself. Now, for the solution of capture of decision, we have to reduce the power of threatening interest group to influence the decision makers. On the other hand, we have the solution for the capture of information, which we have to reduce the abilities or the agent's abilities to exploit the information. Now let's talk about the different types of regulatory capture. We have 5. First, the ex-ante capture. Next is the legal capture, the illegal capture, the direct capture. Lastly, we have the indirect capture. For ex-ante capture, this capture happens before a regulation is even written, and the firm shapes the rules to favor themselves during the design stage. Next, we have the legal capture. So legal capture, influence that is technically legal. Examples are lobbying, the campaign donations. Next, we have the illegal capture. It includes bribery, corruption, or threats. Fourth, we have the direct capture, which this is the direct pressure or influence on regulators and decision makers. Lastly, the indirect capture, which is this is the manipulation of information, the framing, or public messaging to influence the regulation. Now, let us talk about the implications of regulatory capture. So, regulatory capture, it affects the economy in different ways. First, we have the redistribution of surplus benefits. It shifts to firms at the expense of the consumers and taxpayer. Next, we have the impact on economic efficiency. So, the impact is that there is less competition, there is higher prices, and there is a lower quality of the service, and lastly, the slower process of innovation. Next, we have the possibility of revealing or exposing the inefficiency. So sometimes the negative effects of capture, it highlights the weaknesses in the system, and it furthers push for reforms, or this is the first step to initiate for reforms. Next, we have the manifestations in network industry. So in the sectors like the electricity, the water, the telecoms, the transport. So the capture, it appears as overpricing. It delayed the investments, and there is also the presence of weak service quality, and the barriers, or there are hindrances that prevents new firms to enter. So these industries, they are vulnerable because they depend heavily on technical information. Now let us discuss the regulatory coherence in the Philippines, or the case of Philippines. So this is according to the material of Leandro 2016, which he explains that the Philippines, it struggles with regulatory coherence, which means that our regulatory system, it is fragmented, it is inconsistent, and it is overlapping, which makes the capture easier. So we have 2 examples here. We have the POGO and we have mining. So first, for POGO, different agencies such as the PAGCOR, the immigration, the local governments, and even the police, they had overlapping and inconsistent tools. So there is a lack of coordination, and this lack of coordination, it allowed firms to choose to what rules they will follow, and it, of course, it exploits the gaps in the enforcement. Next, we have the mining. For mining sector, there is a conflicting mandates between the DNR, the LGUs, and the National Economic Agencies, in which it resulted to inconsistent policy signals. So some firms they benefited from unequal enforcement. There is a weak environmental oversight, and there is a regulatory loophole. So these examples, both of the examples, they show how weak the regulatory coherence create opportunities for regulatory capture.
Today I'll be reporting about my part on government favoritism of parties of Mineral 2018 and Shirley 2019. So first things first, the culture and favoritism is a concept interlinked and entwined to one another because there is balance of government favoritism and privileges and its influence of business leaders, such actors, business leaders, and also politicians. Different perspectives on regarding markets and governments regarding in which legitimacy and favorism is employs that there is a structured strategy approach detailed across several key sections to analyze these complex relationships. So next one is according to Mitchell 29 is government favorism refers to the actions by governments that in which they provide specific advantages or privileges to particular firms, industries, or occupations over others. Uh, it is a phenomenon where the money goes, the people goes. This closely linked to the concept of economic privilege and can manifest in various ways. So, exceptions of firm industries favoritism. This measures identifies whether business leaders believe that their firms benefits from various forms of government, such as their consumer guarantees, subsidies, bailouts, and regulatory barriers, petition, licensing, tariffs, and quotas. In the case uh, surveys approximately 41 to 61% of business leaders perceive that their firm is benefiting from at least form of favoritism. Tax break is the most commonly reported, in which it can benefit there's a concept, the diversification of value and profits within the favoritism itself. So next one is the perceptions of privilege dependency. It is a continuous variable assesses the degree to which business leaders believe that their firms would be negatively impacted if they lost government assistance or government support, assuming that other firms in their industry also lost similar support. And the Meshie captures perceived reliance on such privilege. The concept of the money goes, people goes. The concept of panawagan per se. No? And next one is favoritism and beliefs about markets. It examines how favoritism leads to social advantage of free markets, current institution U.S. markets, whether it is too free or not free enough in fairness of competition or competition per se. Business leaders in favored firms are more likely believe the market should be open, less inclined to say that the market is now free. Competition is unfair, that there is a contradiction itself, but more likely inclined to support government intervention, believe favoritism is beneficial and legitimate. That leads to a culture of rent seeking. But if there is, and also the monopolize companies, companies where there is no competition at all. And second is favoritist beliefs about governments and the perceived benefits of restriction in consumer economy as well. Whether the government restricts competition, business leaders and privileged firms favor great government participation, believe regulations benefit customers, the consumers in the economy. It indicates that those privileged more believe government should favor specific businesses and industries. So, what the implications were is that government present and foster culture of rent seeking. No? Individuals and privileged firms is so substantially more likely to agree that the government should support specific industries to less the amount of information that given to the people itself that it can benefit on and all people or business leaders. And also, if the business community develops a rough understanding of markets and favoritism, it can undermine the general public's faith in markets and economic freedom. This erosion of trust can lead to ideological movements that promote discriminatory policies and ultimately jeopardizes the existence of free and open market and competitive market, and can also leads to self-perpetuating cycle where favoritism becomes normalized in status quo, and hindering the development and also the maintenance of truly free and competitive markets itself. So lastly, there this reading about the chronic capital of Almeno 2019, how Duterte embraced the oligarchs. To some, to conclude per se, is that Almineral report demonstrate that the Duterte's governance sustained the long-standing system of elites capture, rent-seeking behavior, and political favoritism in the Philippines. That rather than reducing uh, oligarchic power, that administrative supply transferred in influence new circles of allies, it creates a deep implications for the Philippines development. No? Nagiging mabagal yung development within the Philippines. Within the Philippines itself. Well, yes, as you can see, the two-speed success, the double economy has doubled 30 years ago, but the development, of course, is still lagging. So, also the fair competition itself is unfair. And it weakens also the democratic accountability and reinforce a political economy where loyalty, not competence, determines the economic success.
Good day, I am Jennaiah Oximoso, and I will be presenting the part of the bureaucratic inefficiency, an article by Chikianko 2020. Now, this source stated clearly that the dysfunctional, weak, inefficient, and corrupt bureaucracy was actually a binding constraint that prevents our bureaucracy to achieve its full potential. Now, the reason the bureaucracy stays weak is because our current political and economic rules make it beneficial for these powerful people to keep it that way. They retain this kind of system that serves them enough for them not to change it. With that, I'm going to discuss 3 points that explains why there is a bureaucratic inefficiency in our country. The first point is because of the political spoils system. As we can see in the caricature, we have there rewarding friends and not merit, because as we all know, giving jobs, appointing or electing even, is highly significant when it comes to our country or the government. In fact, I think pointing in the bureaucracy is more important or highly significant than the electing positions in the government, because when we elect or when we appoint rather in the bureaucracy, this bureaucracy serves as the backbone of the functioning system of our country. Now, we can ask who gets the job in a political spoils system. According to the article, it is said that bureaucratic positions, even down to the assistant director level, are highly politicized or said to be highly politicized. This means that the incoming president often appoints their allies, political allies, friends, supporters, even families or cronies instead of the most qualified experts. Now, the incentive to this is that the political supporters demand their share of bureaucratic spoils, and this practice leads to the lack of meritocracy. Meritocracy, when we say meritocracy, it is a system in which the advancement is basically on individual ability or achievement, and this article argues that it is lacking in terms of that. So I inserted there a video of ex-President Duterte. His administration is a good example of why the bureaucracy is inefficient. When President Duterte tried appointing cronies, they were often corrupt and inefficient, and one of the sources stated that when he turned these ex-military, they often lacked the necessary skills or institutional memory, which, as we observed, any competence that they introduced basically vanished when the next generation or the next administration rather took over. The second point is because of the influence of the oligarchy. Now, who exactly are the oligarchs? The oligarchy refers to this concentration of power in the hands of the few. Now, in the Philippine context, these are the powerful businesses or business groups that entrench in regulated inward-looking industries. Now, we have here the inward-looking industries. We have the real estates, banking, and power energy. Now, these industries don't rely heavily on exports or competing internationally. Why? Because these groups do not want an impartial and efficient bureaucracy. Instead, they want to capture the regulator or the government that oversees them to prevent any competition. An example is the LTFRB, who refused to open the public transport sector to innovation and enabled monopolies, and this kind of regulatory capture benefits the powerful businesses, not the consumer or the broader economy. The third or the last point that I want to discuss is the failure of the long-term planning. Now, the bureaucracy is supposed to be part of the government that provides a medium or essential medium to long-term thinking. Elected officials who only serve 3 to 6 years must focus on short-term issues or pander the short-term interests of the voters, while the bureaucracy is supposed to act as a counterweight to the short-sightedness. But then again, since the bureaucracy is dysfunctional, it fails to provide this critical long-term stability, leading to major administrative failures like the government departments spending many funds on large infrastructure projects such as the Build, Build, Build. With that being said, how can we actually force a change? Since the current system is dysfunctional, and many experts actually believe that the bureaucracy will never truly reform itself unless the fundamental economic structure of it changes. So one solution is that we must focus on outward-looking businesses that rely heavily on exports like manufacturing and agriculture, since we live in a tropical country. And for the country to succeed in competitive foreign markets, our nation's producers must still be backed up by the government itself. Hence, suggesting that by breaking highly concentrated markets and attracting more competitions as well as focusing more on exports, the country will naturally raise the demand for better governance.
Hello everyone. Now let's discuss rational ignorance theory as per Congleton and Duffy. Now, before that, we should discuss first the concept of ignorance and natural ignorance as per Congleton. Ignorance occurs when an individual is totally uninformed about a fact, phenomena, variable, or even characteristic. It is also known as imperfect information because it allows previously unrecognized things to be recognized and discovered. And in some deterministic phenomena, ignorance and knowledge is binary, which means that we may either know a fact or we may not. And this shows that decisions are often made under the conditions of uncertainty. And so, Congleton also believed that individuals are not born knowledgeable, which means that we are not born naturally in this world that we have knowledge, rather we are born completely ignorant into this world, and he calls that as the state of natural ignorance. And in order to overcome that, we should have an access to information and available resources to learn. And he furthers that idea by comprehensively discussing rational ignorance. It occurs when individuals consciously chooses not to learn or acquire information primarily because the cost of learning outweighs the benefits of what the information would bring to that individual. That's why Duffy explained that individuals or why some voters remain to stay ignorant over political issues, or why they choose to stay ignorant with those political issues. For instance, a single voter chooses not to learn or study politics or the political issues because he believes that his vote wouldn't really change a thing, and so because of the limited time, attention, and resources available, the decision of that voter to stay or remain ignorant becomes rational. Now, in the context of public finance, it develops into rational fiscal ignorance because many people in the government don't really understand how the government collect taxes, how they spend money, like for example in terms of budgeting and government projects. because it is too time consuming and it is hard to understand. And that's why, according to Congleton, the people who are directly interested about public fiscal, or the people who have something to gain or lose, are the only ones who take time to understand it. And that shows that there is a gap between ordinary citizens and the people who have direct interest about such matters. And it also develops into fiscal illusion, where people misunderstood or get the wrong idea about how public funds are used and allocated. There are several propositions of rational fiscal ignorance. First is that it can be rational, especially when it takes a lot of time and efforts and even expenses to make or to acquire such information. And next is the relevance of pecuniary interest. It is basically when people who can make money out of such fiscal information always know at least as much as the people who can't. Third is that the existence of rational fiscal ignorance is sufficient condition for the existence of fiscal illusion. And fourth is that rational ignorance is always greater before elections than afterwards. Fifth is it is subjective, and last is its manipulability, and wherein the host of information affects the decision of the voter to remain or stay ignorant. Elections with partly informed voters illustrated it perfectly, especially when in most democracies people are most motivated to learn about specific policies when it affects them personally, not just when they want general public services. And Duffy identified three main difficulties in rational ignorance theories. First, he believed that the theory is ill-defined. It is not clear when the concept is acceptable or rational. Second is that it is not clear that the rational part of the label is satisfied. And third is that rational ignorance lacks a legal basis in modern law. Now, this contrasts with politics because it is even expected or tolerated among voters. And it is very evident when President Marcos accused former President Rodrigo Duterte of spreading false information about national budget, because many people, because it is too time consuming to understand the issue and to research for that issue, many people only rely on political figures or even in what's currently trending at that time, instead of researching about the issue itself. And ultimately, rational ignorance affects how individuals make decisions.